Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Toy Thursday with Johnny Tiger on June 17th, 2021. I almost said June 21st. Yeah, try, try to skip over all those numbers in between. Anyway, first, let me do a little public service on here before we start. If you're from the Richmond, Vancouver area in British Columbia, Canada, like myself, I tried a new restaurant today and I am not very impressed. So if you have thought about trying a restaurant called Jianghu or Jianhu, in their Chinese name is Jianghu Taishi Recao. Feel free to pass it by. It's not that good. Very overpriced. $20 dishes, and you'll maybe get $9 value out of that. The taste was okay. I would say the generally speaking, as far as how things tasted go, it's not bad, but the portion is extremely small. So yeah, just keep that in mind. They do have a very extensive, traditionally Taiwanese menu, which was what drew me to them in the first place. But I'm definitely not going to order from that place again because that kind of price gouging is just not acceptable. Now, back to the main topic of the day. For the past few weeks, we have been illustrating the five elements in Chinese uh, zodiac, the Chinese horoscope, with action figures. Quick recap for those who don't know what we're talking about. Just like in regular astrology horoscope, you find out if someone is Gemini or Pisces or Capricorn. Love Capricorn, by the way. Capricorn is like the coolest sign. Because I'm a Capricorn, that's why I'm saying that. Um, and you go by people's blood type. In Chinese horoscope, you have to figure out which year they're born uh, to determine which Chinese animal they are: ox, year of the ox, year of the rat, or dragon, or snake, etc., etc. And also, you have to figure out their element. Depending on which year you're born, you are one of the five elements: metal, water, wood, fire, and earth. How do you figure these years out, the elements out? How do you figure out what element you are? If I can only talk, um, you go by the end number of your birth year. So if your year end in 0 or 1, like 1980, 1991, for example, then you are a metal element. If your end year is 2 or 3, then you are water. 4 and 5, wood. 6 and 7, fire. 8 and 9, earth. So tonight we'll be looking at the representative for the fire element from the action figure world. Unlike most of the other elements, the fire one is probably the easiest to do. I really struggled when I had to pick out representative for water and wood, and I know it will be a struggle for earth as well. But fire is the easiest. There are just so many characters that are fire related, fire based, fire by nature. There's so many blazing this, infernal that, fiery this, so on and so on. Fire got to be one of people's favorite element, and it's one of the most often used. This is actually why when I used to play role-playing games online, like games like Dungeons and Dragons and so on and so on, and when it came time to pick what element I was, because if you wanted to use magic, often you have to specialize in a specific element. I never would pick fire because that's just too pedestrian. I mean, anyone can make fire magic look good, but if you can actually play a character who is using lightning or ice or wind, and then you can make that character look cool, then you're really good. So I never picked fire. I just found that that's way too common. Too many people like to use fire as their element. So to start off our list, our first representative from Fire is this rather ordinary-looking gentleman, but not too much so, in front of the camera. This is, if you can stay standing long enough for me to talk, come on. This is Chado Santana, aka in El Diablo. Who is El Diablo? Well, those of you who watched the Suicide Squad movie would have recognized this guy. He was played by actor Jay Hernandez, and I was told that this action figure's likeness to the actor is very, very good. This action figure was made by Mattel about, I would say, almost 10 years ago, and Ordinarily, ordinarily, El Diablo is not the kind of action figure that I would be too interested in. I mean, if you look at him, he's a ordinary kind of guy with bald head, and he's wearing a ordinary kind of jacket, and he's wearing ordinary looking uh, gray pants, and he got white sneakers on his feet. However, there are a few things that really made me want this action figure. First, of course, because I watched the Suicide Squad movie, and I kind of figured him to be one of the most badass characters in that group. And also, this is a guy who he is one of the very few Hispanic characters out of DC Comics. And as some of you might have picked up, I am all for diversity and having different races on my action figure display. So suffice to say, if this guy was just another generic-looking white guy, most likely, no offense to white Caucasian people, but there's a lot of Caucasian white superheroes, supervillains. So if this guy was just a generic Caucasian, then I wouldn't have been as interested as in him. But like I said, he is Hispanic, and that's actually quite rare on my shelf, at least. And he has an interesting look. He got a shaved head and a skull tattooed on his face. He has the death scythe tattooed on his forehead, and the letter for Diablo tattooed on the bottom of his face. Uh, the more characters and hash mark tattooed on the back of his head. His jacket is also kind of interesting. He has the name of his gang uh, on the back of his jacket, and in the front of his jacket, he actually has the name Diablo on his chest. I mean, that got to be kind of interesting, right? I mean, which one of us would actually walk around outside with our own name uh, written or stitched on our jacket? Well, that's like, really confident, really a sign of great confidence. Now let's talk a little bit about exactly who is this El Diablo guy? Who is this uh, Shado Santana? That he's going to open our fire-themed uh, Toy Thursday for us. El Diablo is a Hispanic gangster, assassin, drug dealer, and he tried his best this, to hide his illegal activity from his wife. In addition to being a ruthless gangster, El Diablo was also a metahuman. What is a metahuman? That is DC Comics' way of saying he is a superhuman, but because the term mutant has already been copyrighted and patented by Marvel Comics, so DC Comics couldn't really call him a mutant, so he turned into a metahuman. But it's basically the same thing. He's not quite human. He's a uh, he's a human who can do crazy, crazy things. In this case, command fire. One night, when his wife stumbled across a stash of his illegal weapons and belongings, they had a big argument. During the argument, El Diablo's wife said she was going to take the children away from him. That's when things went from bad to really, really, really bad. Because he was so angry, El Diablo lost control of his fire ability, ended up burning down the house, and his wife and two children also perished in the fire. There was a great deal of remorse and blaming himself, of course, so El Diablo turned himself in to the authority and was locked away as a meta-human criminal. And he stayed in prison for many years until the government needed to put together a super strike team to go investigate what was going on in the Suicide Squad movie. I am trying not to spoil the movie for you guys, but let me just give you a brief description, just in case some of you have not seen it. I don't want to spoil it for you, but these two people, and then they found this Egyptian artifact, and then turned them into some kind of immortal god, and they decide to destroy the world. Okay, that's basically it. And then the U.S. government wanted to try to deal with these two gods, and at the time, Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman were all busy elsewhere. I don't know where. So someone in the government got a bright idea. Hey, we have all those super villains locked away in jail. How about we give them a chance to redeem themselves? We'll form a strike team called the Suicide Squad and send them over there to investigate these new gods. Well, El Diablo was one of the people sent over as a part of the Suicide Squad. And for most of the beginning of the movie, as far as the viewers are concerned, he really isn't much to look at. I mean, he's really mild mannered. He's almost a pacifist. He doesn't really do anything out of the ordinary. He showed ability to create fire on his hands, as this action figure shows that fire on his hand like this. Yeah, but well, things just falling over. But as some of the other characters were teasing him, are you good for anything other than lighting cigarette or something like that? So for most of the movie, we were kind of led to believe that El Diablo I mean, he's a guy who can make fire with his hand, but he's not much. Uh, Without spoiling it for you guys too much, he turned out really, really badass. And when he decided to unleash his power, when he decided, now don't forget, this is a guy who has serious self recrimination. This is a guy who blamed himself for the death of his wife and children. So for most of the movie, he's actually holding in his ability. He's not willing to tap into his ability. But when he finally decided to let go, when he finally decided to take it seriously, he transformed into this giant, flaming, demonic creature and actually went toe to toe with one of the gods. Like, that is cool. I'm actually kind of sad that Mattel, who made this action figure, never made the transformed El Diablo because I wanted that version. I really wanted that transformed El Diablo, but nah, we only get the normal human-looking version. Normally, as some of you who watched the past few episodes know, if all he is a guy who can create fire, then he wouldn't qualify for today's episode because I want uh, characters that are actually fire by nature, not just someone who can create fire. But because he has the ability to turn into that giant flaming infernal monster when he wants to, I figure that's close enough. I figure that maybe that is the true El Diablo. Maybe this human shape is just what he shows the rest of the world when he's not pissed off. So we have El Diablo here to open the Toy Thursday for the fire element. This action figure doesn't have the best articulation because he's made by Mattel, and Mattel is just not very good at making action figures. Uh, Unless they're making dinosaurs, they make some great dinosaurs. But he is okay. I mean, his head turns side to side, kind of nod a little bit. His shoulder go forward and back, side to side. He can flap his arm. His bicep turns so he can kind of cross his arm, but not very good because his elbow only bend like maybe 50-degree angle. They don't even go full 90-degree. And his wrist, the swivel in his waist. Is there a torso crunch? Nope, not really. Uh, Legs kick forward and back, side to side. He can do the split. Knee bend, but again, just only a 90-degree bend, and the ankle barely move at all. So no, he's not very articulated. He's kind of generic looking in this human form, but I liked the character enough to make me to acquire this action figure of El Diablo. Let's set him aside, and we'll bring in the next representative to the fire element. By the way, a character like El Diablo also have the advantage that when you are doing action figure reviews, he is very good for comparison because basically he's a normal sized human. He's not like super buff like Superman, and he's not like Batman. He just kind of look like a normal, shaven-headed, tattooed guy, but he still kind of look normal, uh, and just a normal proportioned guy in jacket, pants, and shoes. So he is very good for using to compare with other action figures for people to get an accurate size, as we will see in a little while. But first, our next representative of the fire element is a very cool looking, very hot looking creature. Look at that. I only acquired this one about 6 months ago. He's made by Schleich in their Eldrador fantasy line. We have shown another Schleich Eldrador figure back when we were doing the water element in the form of the ice spider. Well, now Eldrador has a representative for the fire element. This is the Fire Eagle. The fire eagle lives above the volcano in the fire world in the Altador uh, fantasy world, and anyone who enters the fire world will be detected by the fire eagle, and he will swoop down from above and use his burning claws and burning beak to kill them. Like most of the Altador Schleich figures, this is a really good looking. I mean, I can't really say he's an action figure. He's more like a figurine. He does have movement, articulation in his wings, but that's about it. But again, like I pointed out in the case of the ice spider, when it's something like this, when it's a giant eagle, or a giant spider or something like this, I don't really need it to be super articulated. Like, as long as it can hover in the background to look threatening, it's fine. I don't need it to be able to break dance. I don't need the leg to be able to move. I don't need the head to be able to move. It looks pretty cool just the way it is. It is a very bright looking action figure. definitely denotes the name of the fire eagle. There's like fiery details all over the feathers, the back. The back actually looks more like a back of a dragon than an eagle. There's all these spines or maybe that flames coming out of the center of the back, and the tail feather is positioned uh, flat, pointed down, so this eagle can actually park itself on the ground like that and still look like it's ready to swoop into the air and do battle. Like I said, there are articulation at the shoulder, so you can position the wings a little bit different. The wings can be posed up like this, or can be posed down like this, depending on what you want your eagle to look like. Now, the reason I wanted the fire eagle because it is an interesting fantasy creature that is not a dragon and not a phoenix. It's not a conventional fantasy creature. And also, this character, this figurine, just happened to look big enough. So he's actually quite uh, imposing against other action figures. Let me bring out Diablo. Like I said, El Diablo is really good for comparison. But let me bring out the Diablo back so you guys can see just how massive this eagle is. Here is El Diablo standing in front of the Fire Eagle. Now, as we can see, Fire Eagle on the ground is shorter, but he almost come up to El Diablo's shoulder, and the wing can totally engulf El Diablo. So if we pose this eagle from above, diving down like this, that's one scary eagle. That's a huge, huge eagle. Like it's wider than El Diablo is tall, and it's got quite a uh, bit of serious heft to its body. Let me pose the beak. The beak can almost go right over El Diablo's head. This is a giant sized fire eagle, which just makes him really, really cool. Moving right along, next we'll have a member of the Final Fantasy Guardian Force. As before, when we showed the water element, we had a Guardian Force in there called Shiva. I don't know if you guys remember, that was a naked ice a lady. By the way, she kind of had a bit of an accident on camera, so afterward it took me almost an hour to fix her. So let's hope her compatriot won't have the same issue today. So from the Final Fantasy Guardian Force line, made in the early 2000s by uh, Koto Kabiya, I believe, this is Ifrit, the Fire Guardian. Ifrit, in Final Fantasy video game, was the third Guardian you can acquire. And he's one of the very few Guardians that actually can talk and express his emotions. And he is a fire creature, uh, very impressive looking. He's almost 7 inches tall, very muscular. He kind of reminds me a little bit of lion, dragon. I mean, he has this giant horn. These horns on his head, they're very impressive. Each horn is almost 5 inches long on their own, and they curve over his shoulder, uh, looking very, very majestic. Just look at those horns. I mean, one thing I always say about Japanese character design, the Japanese characters, they usually look kind of generic, simple. But Japanese people, they will add one element in there that's really exaggerated to make that character look uh, very distinguished. Usually it's the hair, sometimes it's their uh, biceps. Some characters going to have giant arms. or sometimes it's going to be a tail. But in this case, in the case of Ifrit, it's the horns on his head. I mean, this guy probably got the most impressive looking horn of all my action figures. The rest of his body, uh, kind of, like I said, remind me a little bit of a werewolf or lion, were-lion, some kind of a creature that is standing up like a human, but at the same time, it's very bestial looking. Uh, his legs, for example, they are kind of like uh, a dog's leg with claws and forward, uh, forward-leaning uh, configuration, so not like a human. Uh, his hip are really, really narrow, super tiny waist. I don't know what that's about. Like this guy's got the serious small waist, but massive musculature in the upper body, right? And his arms are really long. Let me look, if you guys look up the profile here, look how when he's standing, his arm almost reach the ground. So he has a kind of a ape look about him. On his hand, he has serious looking sharp nails. There are like handcuffs or shackles around his wrist and fur, or maybe these are flames. I'm not quite sure. The poking out of his hips and elbow. Overall, he's a very distinguished looking action figure, but as you guys can see, I'm struggling with him on camera again. I must register a complaint because these Japanese action figures do not stand very good and they break all the time. And just overall, it's a uh, massive traumatic experience trying to post them on camera because if this guy fall over, those horns, those long, majestic looking horns, going to break. I just know it. And this guy is actually quite expensive. Before I started today's video, I went online and took a look, and to buy this guy, back then when I purchased him in the early 2000s, he was only about 15 bucks, which was really expensive at the time. Now he's almost 100 bucks. So uh, yeah, I'm not going to mess around with him too much on camera. He does have a lot of articulation. Actually, his shoulder can go in and out like this, and forward and back. Elbow can bend, wrist can turn. Head, no, nothing in the head, nothing in the waist, but his leg can kick forward and back. His knees can move. So yeah, he got a bit of articulation, but he has problem staying standing. So we are going to take him off camera before the unforeseen happen, and we are going to bring in the next guy, our last representative of the fire element. But before that, let me quickly do a rundown of the fire signs, positive and negative, for you guys before I forget. Like I said, if you are born, if your if your birth year ends on uh, 6 or 7, then that means you're a fire element. The positive of the fire element are quite a lot. Fire people, they are fun. They are the most fun, the most romantic of all the elements. Uh, they can be very, very driven. They are very good at multitasking, and they are very creative, cheerful, and they're good at being the life of the party. Dating a fire sign is said to be very fun sometimes, most of the time, but there are some negative to the fire sign. Fire signs are notoriously scatterbrained. Um, People who are fire signs find it very difficult to focus on one task. Sometimes they will appear. They will start off very, very interested in something and then burn out very quickly because they go so fast, so hard in the beginning with the project. Fire signs also tend to have really bad temper sometimes and can be rather destructive to others and to themselves when they feel unhappy. Fire signs work really, really good with wood, and fire signs also work pretty good with earth because wood gives life to fire and fire gives life to earth. Now, let's bring in our last representative, and this is a very cool looking action figure. This guy is called the Disciple, and actually, there's supposed to be 12 disciples in the Spawn comic book, 12 heavenly warriors, the highest ranking, toughest of the tough uh, warriors from heaven that guard the central world of the universe. And this is one of those disciples. But because McFarlane only made one, so we call him the disciple, even though he's just one of the 12. I believe this is disciple number 12. I think there is a marking on his face that tell us which one he is. He is almost 9 inches tall, very, very muscular looking character in a black skin tight suit with blue steel armor outside. And his armor has cross crucifix etched over it, and there's a crucifix design over his the front of his mask. I guess is that a mask or is that a helmet? I don't know. He is a tall, very imposing looking knight for the forces of heaven. And in the comic book, this disciple was so powerful he could tear apart the spawn. And for those of you who don't know Spawn comics, Spawn is the main character, a guy who is imbued with demonic power, very, very strong, very hard to kill. He's technically the good guy, but because he's imbued with demonic power, there's a lot of these guys from heaven try to kill him because he got demonic power in him. Um, so the disciple was able to rip Spawn apart with his bare hands alone, and Spawn didn't even stand a chance during their first encounter. The disciple basically just ripped him to pieces and then threw his head into a dumpster and then walked away like nothing happened at all. Of course, later, because Spawn was the main character, so of course later Spawn came back and had his revenge and then defeated this disciple. But that's just the way stories go because Spawn's the main character; he has to win. Um, but yeah, the disciple is one of the 12 best of the best heavenly warriors. Now, why is he here representing the fire element? Because as you guys can see, this very tall, very mean-looking heavenly knight, he looks like he's been through a lot of battle. There's cracks and gashes over his armor, and everywhere there's a damage to his armor, you see this fire leaking out of him. Why is that? What is that about? Because the disciples are not human. Disciples are a kind of angel, like well, they're more like archangels basically, and they rather than blood, they have celestial fire, godly fire, the flame of heaven in their body. So whenever they get damaged, these fire leaks out, and these fire create a lot of destruction. They're like, well, in this comic books, they're kind of like uh, laser. You know, when you hurt one of these guys, the holy fire come out of their body and it will burn through anything it touched. So essentially, we have a very scary looking, imposing a holy warrior with holy flame in his blood. Well, the holy flame is his blood. That's why he is our last representative of the fire element, because I think a guy who literally had fire inside his body uh, qualifies as a fire by nature. He was made in the Spawn toy line by Todd McFarlane in the early 2000s. I believe this was 2003. Like most of McFarlane's creation, he is not very articulated. Actually, let me rephrase that. Like most of McFarlane's old creation, McFarlane's creation today are very articulated. So I can't even express how happy I am that Todd McFarlane came back to make action figures and he has finally learned how to make articulated action figures. But yeah, uh, back then when the Disciple was made, he didn't really put a lot of joints in his action figures because he wanted them to look good, uninterrupted. He didn't want all those pins and weird looking creases in the action figure. He wanted them to look like art. Well, this guy looked pretty good. His arm can move, shoulder up and down, arm can turn left and right, other arm up and down, arm turn left and right, can wave at the camera, uh, waist turn. But as I don't know if you guys can see this on the camera, this waist articulation might as well not be there because when you turn the waist, the whole alignment of his body is messed up. There's this huge gap that just, yeah, this doesn't look good. So yeah, you have to keep his waist like that. Leg kind of turn a little bit at the side, but that's about it. So it doesn't matter how you move these joints. He's kind of stuck in this pose. I mean, he's a really badass pose, but uh, that's pretty much it. What you see is what you get. I personally really like the Disciple because he's very impressive looking on the shelf, especially standing at the back of my Holy Warrior display, in the back of all the angels and godly deities. He's that tall, black figure in a very uh, religious looking armor that's standing back there, and you just know that he if he come forward, then things going to get serious. Um, However, I will say that he was also very disappointing because in the comic book, the disciple had weapons forged out of holy fire, which this figure did not come with. He should have had a sword, a fiery sword, or a fiery axe, or something like that. And also, in the comic book, the disciple had a pair of giant flaming wings, angelic wings. This figure also did not come with that. So I guess you can say this is a disciple in his powered down state. Kind of like El Diablo that we shown earlier, they should have made the powered up version, not the powered down version. Uh, but oh well, I mean, better than nothing, right? Now let's bring El Diablo back in the frame. Have him stand with the. Ooh, look at that! El Diablo standing next to the disciple. El Diablo looked like a child, barely come up to the disciple's chest. If you enjoyed these Toy Thursdays, then please do check out the Johnny Tiger Experience podcast. You can find it on any of your podcast platform, even ask for it with your Amazon Echo devices. There we have more detailed, more in-depth reviews of action figures and other products, as well as martial art, self-defense, fitness, a lot of other goodies. So please check it out. Thank you for checking out today's Toy Thursday. We'll be back again tomorrow for Fitness Friday. For now, have a good night.